Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Tactically Misguided. I'm your host, Pat, and with me, as always,
I'm Lobo.
So, you all know what today is, right? Well, probably not because this is going to be posting later next week, but we are filming this on November 10th. And what happened 1775 on November 10th?
Something to do with a gay bar?
The greatest fighting force the world has ever known was drunk and born in a tavern called Tun Tavern on this day, 248 years ago.
Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania. It's an underpass now.
Is it?
Yeah, so I visited it. There's a little sign. It's like a plaque. It's under an overpass. There was a bunch of garbage next to it. It said this is where Tun Tavern was.
Well, that's kind of gay.
Oh, wow. This is a surprise.
That was cleverly planned.
Oh, wow.
Hang
Appreciate it, guys.
Let me
appreciate that. I could show it. Oh, cradle balls.
Cradle.
That's dope. I appreciate that so much, guys.
We'll dive into that. We'll stuff our fat faces afterwards.
Absolutely. Oh no. I appreciate it.
And another glorious gift given to me. Crayola gummies. They're fucking real. They actually make them, and they're actually really good. This does not help our case against eating crayons, though, at all. But with that being said, on to the episode. This week's episode is going to be episode 31, part deuce. Death Squads and
Yerba Mate.
So this is Operation Condor part 2. Before we start diving into it, though, let's hear a word from our sponsors for this episode. Savage Tacticians is a lifestyle apparel company that is 100% veteran-owned and operated to the last detail. They have everything from gym shorts, jeans, tack pants, to kick-ass designs for swim trunks that go matching with their Hawaiian shirts. But most notably for sure are their graphic tees. If you want some really well-fitting attire that looks badass as hell 100% of the time, then head over to savtac.com and check them out. Be sure to use our promo code TM10 to get 10% off your order and show some love to us as well as our friends over at Savage Tacticians.
Bulkhead Energy. Don't be a pussy. Bulkhead Energy is an energy drink that has nootropic properties to provide power, clarity, and mental acuity of a ninja with a flamethrower. We can roll the dice on gas station boner pills or a parachute pack job, but we shouldn't gamble on our energy drinks. Be the reason it takes multiple officers to arrest you. Piss off that liberal college professor. Run that belt until the barrel starts glowing on that machine gun, and show the world that drywall never stood a chance. No one gives a fuck about your shitty day. Down some Bulkhead Energy and get some.
Cooperation among various security services had existed prior to the creation of Operation Condor with the aim of eliminating Marxist subversions during the Conference of American Armies held in Venezuela on 3 September 1973. God, I've got 1775 stuck in my head. Sorry, guys. Brazilian General Breno Borges Fortes, head of the Brazilian army, proposed to extend the exchange of information between various services in order to struggle against subversion.
No, it was pretty much everybody. Brazil, we'll touch that later in the episode, but almost all the countries together had a free flow of information and action. So they could have actionable intelligence. I can tell you how many times intelligence agencies have the ability to understand and know where people are. They just can't take action. The fact that it might be in somebody else's backyard. This gave them basically, we'll call it when we're dealing with white being everything that's overt and black being covert, this gave them cover to be able to figure out where somebody was at and actually take action between all the different countries that we talked about in the previous episode. And we can kind of look at it here. Do you think that would be a good idea if like our military leadership was like, yeah, you find somebody you don't like, you can smoke them regardless if they're in Canada or Mexico? Like somebody that we don't agree with here in America flees to Canada, then we tell the Canadians, and then the Canadians can whack him for us. Kind of a bad deal. if you look at it.
Yeah.
Even if they are communists. But
I mean, I'm kind of for it. I don't know. I'm 50-50 on this. I'm 50-50 on this topic.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what is the difference between covert and clandestine?
There's a lot of people out there that get these things mixed up. In order to understand covert, you need to understand overt. Overt is the actor is known.
Not ovaries, right?
Not ovaries. Overt is what we call white. You know who the actor is. There's no hiding what you're doing or who you are. Covert, you're hiding the actor. So covert action means you're hiding the actor, not necessarily hiding the action. Now, clandestine means hiding the action. A clandestine service, they're hiding what they're doing. Okay. So you can have something that's covert and clandestine, and you can have something that's overt and clandestine. So essentially, if somebody's there and you know who they are, but you don't know what they're doing, that would be overt and clandestine. If you don't know who it is and something happens, that's overt but not clandestine. And if you have no fucking clue of who it was that did something or what they did, that would be a covert and clandestine. Covert and clandestine is usually not actioning. It's usually you're doing intelligence collection. Whereas like if you were to have somebody that was covert, like say somebody committed a bombing and you don't know who it was, that would be just a covert action. But if it's really hard to do something that's clandestine when it comes to actioning because you want people to know what you did. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then we'll talk a little bit about how we do that with this is a big portion of special operation forces and primarily SF and MARSOC, and we'll kind of talk about the different you can't do everything yourself. You have to get auxiliaries, you have to get other units to help you out, and those can be overt, they can be covert, and they can be conducting clandestine or overt operations.
Bullets don't fly without supply.
That too. So we have our operatives. When I say operative, it's anybody that's basically working overtly for or not overtly, they're working for whatever intelligence agencies conducting actions. So your operatives are like your guerrillas, your cadre, the auxiliary, and the underground. The underground are kind of secret. Their identities are hidden. They use a lot of collection and subterfuge, and then they'll do limited assassinations if they have to. Your auxiliary provides support and assistance, such as like transportation and communications. They usually don't fight. They're usually non-direct action. They provide medical functions. This would be basically your clandestine logistics and supply and administration to a certain extent. When it becomes more of a tactical administration, that's more towards like the cadre. And then your guerrilla and your cadre, those are your overt. That's your fighters. That's your political organization. People that are, we'll use Hamas for an example. Hamas, their underground are basically civilians that can move around. Their auxiliary, to a certain extent, are people that are within the wider education spheres and spread out across the globe. And then you look at their guerrillas, the guys fighting, and then their political cadre, which is basically the people that are in the organization, both in like Gaza and over in like the UAE or Oman. They're basically figureheads and stuff like that.
Gotcha. So moving on from that, successful insurgencies often spawn out of discontent that allow rebellion to fester. With the economic misfortunes and the ultra-rich making bank, normal people turned away from the elite puppet masters who were running these countries. As it is so often, it was the poorest people, many minorities, who started these communist insurgent groups. So in March of 1974, representatives of police forces of Chile, Uruguay, and Bolivia met with Alberto Villar. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're going to be my pronunciation guy for most of these. He was the deputy chief of the Argentine Federal Police and co-founder of the AAA Death Squad. to implement coordination guidelines. Their goal was to destroy the subversive threat represented by the presence of thousands of political exiles in Argentina. A month later, Bolivian socialist operatives were found dead in a garage in Buenos Aires.
Buenos Aires.
Buenos Aires. Signs of torture with bullets to the head.
So there was time, space, and will, and the economic misfortunes allowed the socialists to capture these people, to get the message to them. They're disenfranchised people. And so they were like, hey, we need something. Like right now we have basically an oligarchy in charge of us, these super wealthy people that are they're not just being wealthy, they're contributing to the downfall of their society. So the message took to them. Just like 100 years ago, you had the Marxist revolution in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at these people that are disenfranchised. So they spawn these organizations that span across all sections of the workforce, education, and culture. And basically, Alberto Villar set this up with those three countries, and then this is like one of the first definitive actions that they took in conjunction with each other. So those Bolivian socialists, because Bolivia was the first country to take action,
Mm-hmm.
they all fled to Argentina. So that's where he got together with Argentina, between Chile, Uruguay, Bolivia. They all met and kind of worked it out with Argentina. And this all happened also in Venezuela. Venezuela was like, hey, we agree on this. And then when they had their meeting with the AAA, they're like, hey, we're saying you can kill our citizens in your country. It's basically what it was.
So, and that's basically going back to when we kind of we touched on it a little bit on my understanding of the overall picture of what happened with Operation Condor. That was due to us, wasn't it? Like we were putting these people in charge, like in positions of power. We were training them and instilling them there.
We influenced who we wanted and who we didn't want. So are we responsible? Absolutely. We're responsible for putting the people in power. Now, what they did on their own, that's human nature. That person
just kind of went, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on. The Argentine Anti-Communist Alliance.
You don't have to read Spanish.
Yeah, I'm not going to read that.
It's known as the AAA or AAA.
Known as AAA or AAA was the Argentine prowess and anti-communist political terrorist group operated in a joint federal and armed forces of the Argentine Army's forces, linked with the anti-communist group Propaganda do Italian splinter of Gladio. This joint unit targeted operatives with covers as artists, priests, intellectuals, leftist politicians, students, historians, and union members. The fear of threats were very useful. The unit carrying out the killings and forced disappearances during the presidencies of Juan
Perón
and
Isabel Perón. That's what the Peronists. Peronists.
Oh, I love those pierogies.
That's Polish.
Between 1973 and 1976, the group was responsible for the disappearances and death of between 700 to 1,100 socialist operatives.
So basically, Peronists, that president Juan Perón and his wife Isabel Perón, they were the ones that were in charge, and their government was known as Peronists. Like how we know Hitler and the Nazis.
Yeah.
In Spanish terms, when you have Spain, you had Francisco Franco, who was in charge of Spain. He was a fascist. They called him Francoists. So in Spain, instead of giving them the political name of the unit, they'll assign it to whoever's running it, if that makes sense. So the president was Perón, so they call them Peronists. Again, we had the graphic disclaimer of how horrible this was. Some of the some of the torture methods that they used was starvation, mock executions, stuff like that. There was a lot of torture that went on, and then the torture was to scare the other prisoners. So it wasn't, we're going to torture these people so the public fears us. They tortured them to get a result out of the population. So they would
to make an example.
Well, the killings were to make an example, but the torture was used mainly as extracting information within that group of prisoners, if that makes sense. So
okay. Sidebar. So the numbers 700 to 1100. Now that's not including the forced disappearances of the kidnapping of children. That comes later, right?
No, this is for Argentina exclusively. Just Argentina. Now, remember, it says targeted operatives with covers, and we listed all those different types of people. Yeah. So those organizations were using a cover, which is a falsified identity, to hide what they were doing. They were communist insurgents, and they were pretending to be priests, or they were recruited as
professors
in a
university.
Now, you also had internal struggles within these organizations, and sometimes you'll have false flag operations where, somebody, they beef. Like if you look at how the communists in Russia, the Trotsky with the Lenin, and then Stalin, you had different factions within them fighting each other, and Stalin killed all of Trotsky's people. You also had the same thing happening here. So you had different factions within these covert communist organizations. So they would fucking off each other and then blame the government. Now, the government also would do the same thing. They would kill a couple of them and then say, hey, it would make it look like that the other communists murdered them as a internal beef, if you will.
So it was just a whole back and forth on both sides.
Well, and that's why we can't get an exact number. Again, we didn't even have cell phones at this point in time. This is in the 70s. GPS wasn't a thing. We hadn't even mapped the globe.
You mean cell phones didn't exist at one point in time? Holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
You actually had to go to a library and learn things?
Yep.
All right. So Chilean and Uruguayan.
Uruguayan.
Oh my God.
Uruguayan
speech
socialist.
is not with me today. Socialist operatives who were living in Buenos Aires.
Buenos Aires.
Buenos Aires. I can never say that word. Were targeted through 1976. I'm sorry, guys. My speech is all messed up today.
The international targeting of terrorists is gray and ambiguous. The overarching theme. Do the rights of states to ensure life and liberty of society matter more than the life of dissidents? That's a question. It is okay. Is it okay to kill people who are being taken advantage of? So it's a twofold question. These people are trying to overthrow the state. They're trying to institute what can the secondary and tertiary actions would be enslavement and genocide is what the ultimate goal of communism is. Now, is it okay to kill these people, knowing that only a fraction of them actually understand this? The vast majority are what we call useful idiots. They're basically they're your college kids.
Yeah, they're just following.
Yeah, and there's actually, if you read Marx, Engels, and Lenin, these are the people that are in college that are the artists that say, "Oh, it'd be so much better if capitalism didn't exist." If it was a utopia.
Capitalism is evil.
Yeah, and then when the communists show up and they actually take control because these people help them, they're the first ones they line against a fucking wall and shoot. And that right there is, so is it okay to kill those useful idiots? That's the question. They're dissenting against the state. Is that illegal? No. Should a state prioritize the overarching safety of their population to excise a cancer? Remember, we talked about this, about how, was it mold spread?
I was going to bring that up. I
do
not have my science experiment with me anymore. It got too gross. I threw it out. But basically, kind of dawned on me after we carved some pumpkins and we saved some of the seeds, right? We put them in 2 containers. Mm-hmm. So out of probably 150 freaking seeds, one spore of mold ends up getting in there. And over days' time, you could see it just spreading through the other seeds, right? Just like communism. One spore, one useful idiot can spread that ideology throughout and taint the rest of the population.
Yeah,
and there was maybe 6 that managed to not get infected with the mold and actually started kind of growing.
And
right?
what did you have to do to ensure that the mold?
You had to separate the 6 or the seeds that were not contaminated yet. You had to separate them from the rest.
No, this is a very basic analogy. But when we look at it, you have your influencers, your educators, your intelligentsia. Once they have somebody there that's spreading those ideologies, it's very difficult to publicly get rid of them. And people are like, well, you have the right to say whatever you want. Okay, you do. But when does it go from words to actions? That's my question. And should the state have the monopoly on violence when that happens? Because if you see a dude walking around with stars and bars saying, like, let's lynch all black people, or you see a bunch of Hamas militants walking around saying, let's kill all Jews, where does freedom of speech stop? And where does the rule of law begin? Yeah. Like, that's the gray area. Should you be able to burn an American flag? Should you be able to do all these things? But we have to balance what is a person's divine right that was gifted to them by God and what is hateful. Hateful is not a thing. Hate speech is not a thing. As much as I completely disagree with the countless organizations out there, hate speech is not a thing. Now, if you are making threats, if you are preparing, you're planning to take action, that right there, a reasonable person can say, hey, there's a difference between saying, I don't like X person or in group versus we should kill person or X or in group. There's a clearly defined thing there. But you have to understand that from a stoic stance. You have to use reason. You have to understand if it's reasonable, if things are necessary. Because you get people all day, every day that will say wild shit. Wild shit. And so can you
open up your phone for 5 minutes and you're just overloaded with people saying wild shit like that.
So given the opportunity, these socialists we were talking about would slaughter women and children. It's been proven time and time again. And all those countries listed off in the first episode, from Pol Pot in Cambodia, who murdered millions of people, to Mao, who killed upwards of 80 million people. You look at Stalin, who killed 5 million Ukrainians by starving them to death, and then killed millions more Russians and other members of the socialist republics there. You look at the Derg in Ethiopia. There's just oceans of blood from these fucking people, right? Would you say the moral relativism is moot point? But if you're a Nazi stormtrooper or a Nazi admin clerk, you're still a fucking Nazi. Yeah. So if you're
still a part, yes, you're still a cog in that machine.
Absolutely. Now, back to our earlier question, should the state be able to use force against that person, varying on the degree at which they're culpable within that machine as a cog? If they're a big cog and they're actually pushing, say, a chainsaw, versus they're the spark plug that just provides the energy. Well, does that influencer who says I'm a socialist, okay, is he as culpable as the NKVD agent that's putting bullets in the heads of pregnant women? My that's the question we have to ask is, during Operation Condor, at what point was it legal and righteous and moral, and at what point was it absolutely not? At what point did it become a murderous fucking
genocide?
Yeah. Well, it's not a genocide, but because communists aren't real people. But at what point did it go from?
You have to also, with again, the side that when I was researching into it, I guess you could say the side that I was hearing it from was they didn't lean left, but they kind of like bounced back and forth, right? So it was a pretty non-biased take on it, right?
Yeah.
You have to wonder how many of those people were actually a threat, were actually communists.
Yeah. And
Like,
and it's
like you catch a whip, Sally down the street. Yeah, I think she's a communist, and then they go fucking
Smoker.
kidnap her or smoke her without
Due process.
reasonable doubt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Without a actual reason to do that. So I somewhat agree with it because, communists aren't real people.
Yeah.
But then again, how many of them actually were?
Yeah.
And that's where the line gets blurred.
And here in America, it's fashionable to do that. It's irritating because you'll have people that have escaped Venezuela, people that have escaped Cuba, people that have escaped Vietnam, escaped China. They come here and they see these pampered rich kids running around with their ski masks on, like all those Antifa
Fucking
vile
retards.
monsters, vile. And we can do an episode on Antifa and how you should be able to use deadly force on them. Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And this is the next portion. This is important. We'll just call it the side because it's pronounced CA, but just call it side.
So
Sorry.
SIDE, the Argentinian intelligence organization, was a technical and operational service charged with the collection and production of intelligence and counterintelligence in internal and foreign areas, as well as the analysis and formation of a national intelligence strategy in order to handle state affairs.
Now, the two portions of that, there's two portions and then there's two facets. The two portions of it was technical and operational. Mm-hmm. So we have tech, which is involving communications, signals intelligence, tracking. It's all the data crunching.
Yeah.
And then you have operational, which is your human side of it. So they basically, if you were to combine the NSA and the CIA, they both have overlapping spheres of influence when it comes to what their job is, their authorities and stuff like that. But the side were very powerful because what they did is they took, we like to have a separation of powers in the United States. So one organization is not too authoritarian.
Yeah.
Looking at you, FBI. Famous but incompetent.
Fucking alphabet
Yeah,
boys.
fuck those people. So
Or like
and
the
then-
ATF likes to think they are.
yeah, you're a fucking revenue service. Get fucked, bro. Then you had the two facets, which was internal and foreign, which is dangerous. That's dangerous because FBI is supposed to be domestic, right?
Yep.
And the CIA is supposed to be foreign. And the DIA is supposed to cover down on the military, and the NSA is supposed to cover down on in the tech portion of it, the cyberspace, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Now combine all those into one thing and give them the absolute power to be judge, jury, and executioner. This is where what I'm saying is this birthed a monster. So the CIA taught the side to collect and analyze our C-Day. I'm not going to sit here and go through and roll my R's and combine my L's to make a Y sound, but so we taught the side to collect and analyze intelligence and create packages on the insurgents. This is what's called actionable intelligence. So instead of like what cops like to do is build a case. And the FBI is even worse about it. We have to build a case. We have to prove this stuff, which is important when it comes to due process. But if you stop at that and you say, well, this person's involved, there's not enough to go after them. And that happens all the time in law enforcement. In the military, you don't have to worry about that. Target packages have matrices. And to the degrees of contact, that degree of contact, if it has to do with any sort of lethal action or aid to support lethal action, you can wind up on a JPEL list. So if you're just a guy donating money through a cell phone app to a fucking bomb maker or whoever handles money for a bomb maker, you're fucking fair game.
Oh yeah.
The only thing I can see that in law enforcement is when it comes to like money laundering or scamming and these pedophilia rings. That's the only time that law enforcement will do that. So like you'll go after a drug dealer and people will leave the people that just bought the drugs alone. They'll leave the person who gave that drug dealer a ride. They'll leave that person who owns the property that drug dealer resides on. if we truly wanted to fucking handle this problem, like handle it, you would go after everybody with a matrix.
Everybody that's involved in it.
Yeah, absolutely. But we can't do that. And for good reason, because we don't want this shit happening. We had our 3-letter agencies work with their intelligence organizations. Side was all around a bunch of incredibly intelligent and efficient psychopaths. If you didn't run, they killed you. If you did, then they'd kill your family. They routinely used captured insurgents to lure others into traps. It wasn't below them to use people's children against them. Rape was a tool they learned. With a large supply of young men in the army who saw the left for what they were, which was arbiters of death, many had family that were killed by these insurgents. So, and then rape wasn't reserved for women. I'm going to sort of throw that out there. It's a tool that these people used, and it was absolutely evil. The horrors were visited on family members and of the dissidents. So one of the most fucked up things is threat of torture works better than torture. You kill an insurgent. Okay, you just took them off the battlefield. You remember how they said, if you shoot somebody, we learned this at sniper school. You shoot a guy, you take him out. That's it. You wound the guy, it takes 3 people to take care of him. Now, if we're talking direct action, that's fine. You wound a guy who's taking a shit where he feels safe. That spreads a psychological message behind the lines that I'm never safe. So if I say I declare war on communist insurgents, or let's use drug dealers here. You're a fentanyl dealer, and I say I will fucking kill you. All right, cool. You just took one down, another one's going to take his place. Say I'm not going to kill that drug dealer. Say I'm going to go kidnap his mom and torture her, or his niece, or his newborn. You're now putting influence not just on him, because he has the burden of knowing that he is going to cause this action. It's everybody around him. So instead of doing a very mute point of ending that person's life, you're now pushing these people to be motivated. You're giving them a motivation, external stimuli to be able to control what their behavior is going to be, which is to not support that drug dealer. Yep. That's what they were essentially doing. Does it justify it? Absolutely not. It's fucking morally incomprehensible. Like, you shouldn't be doing these things. This is shit that we see in like the Congolese Civil War and Yugoslavia. Like, we're a Western country. We shouldn't be supporting people that were doing this stuff. No. But at the end of the day, this is a little bit of a history lesson. But history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. So we see this stuff that's happening here, and we're thinking, it sounds a lot like what's going on right now.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and then this next one is the Dina. We'll just call it Dina.
Yeah, that's exactly how I was going to say it. So,
great minds think alike.
The Chilean intelligence organization, really cool logo, a gauntlet.
Mm-hmm.
The Chilean agency was groomed by the CIA. Fuck, I hate when we do that. And for 4 years, it ran a campaign against the media. Where does that sound familiar?
Bat signal, FBI, CIA.
Breaking the fourth wall.
Breaking the fourth wall.
Which we already do that.
Well, we do.
Yes, we do.
We break all walls to include ceilings, glass ceilings.
Gotta keep punching through the ceiling.
Yeah, right, the logo is cool as shit. It looks like a fucking like a knight's gauntlet, and it's got its. I could just imagine somebody wearing that on their shoulder, just ripping teeth out of somebody's head. And
the Infinity Gauntlet.
Without the stones, but just in some dank, dark basement where he's just ripping the teeth out of some communist who murdered a police officer or a political person. I could see him. That's badass as shit, man.
Yeah, it is.
Sorry.
All right. So Dina operatives infiltrated organizations in economic, education, religious, and social fields. They kidnapped or killed a lot of people. They did kill far less than what the media would have you believe, but kidnapping and torturing was their thing. They mostly targeted the journalists and leftist sympathizers, which there was a, I don't know if we're going to cover it in this one. Maybe it's further down. There was a journalist that was involved with that actually brought all of this to light after he got kidnapped, put on a plane, flown. I think he was flown back to his country. He escaped, and then he went. I think he went to NATO
Yeah.
or United Nations and was basically trying to be like, this is what's fucking going on.
Yeah.
Like presenting his findings of like, this is what's going on with Operation Condor. This is the shit we're not fucking seeing behind the fucking black veil. But anyways, I digress.
So what Side did versus what the Dina was Chilean. And Chile is a very cool country. It's very long. It's one of the longest countries in the world. It basically extends the entire west coast of the South American continent, and it borders a ton of countries. And so it has access to countries up throughout, right?
Yeah.
So what they wound up doing versus what the Side or C-Day did is they're like, hey, we're going to counter projection. We're going to counter the influence. So they were going after journalists, and they were going after the sympathizers for these organizations that were involved in spreading the message. So you spread message through the workforce. You spread it through education. So you have unions. Any state that has police unions, they've got a crime problem. Any place that has teachers unions, they have a fucking education problem. It's kind of synonymous because you have basically socialized / thin veil of communism influence to that organization. And so they were like, instead of doing direct action against all these people and going after their family members like Side did, they're like, we'll just kill the people that are creating communists. Which was an interesting way to do about it. They dropped a lot less bodies, the Dina did than Side. And both were very effective. It's just whether or not, one of them was just wanted to put in the work of dropping bodies. That's essentially what it came down to.
Yeah.
And how much cover they had. Like Argentina versus Chile. Argentina wound up fucking around and finding out when they tried to take the Falkland Islands from the Brits. And so we had been man training and equipping the Argentinians. Well, the Brits were our ally too. So we kind of said, oh, do we really want these guys to win? No. Okay. We basically set up everything, their intelligence apparatus, their national security, their armed forces. So we basically, the reason the UK won the Falklands War is because we basically created the Argentinian military. We did. So we knew it inside and out. We were able to give them everything from signals intelligence to literally tracking their movements. Excuse me. Running small groups of police and military personnel, Dina would create target packages and use intelligence matrices to create a never-ending loop of actionable targets. They did fuck up. This is hilarious. I think it's hilarious. But so there was this dude. His name was Orlando Letelier. His name's Orlando. He was an opposition figure against General Pinochet. He was the ruler of Chile. Mm-hmm. And he was released from a political prison. He was arrested and tortured for about a year. But he's a communist, so don't fucking feel bad. Henry Kissinger, you remember from our last episode, had Chile release him. But the old shit-stained Orlando got smoked with a car bomb. So he wound up getting in prison, tortured. Our Secretary of State said, let him go. They let him go, and they killed him. And they did it the worst fucking possible way. Can you guess where they killed him?
Probably in broad daylight in a city square somewhere.
In fucking Washington, D.C.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yep. Daddy just slapped mommy at the dinner table and shit got real. While Pinochet was a fucking monster, he was our monster and had shown that he was over the training wheels. So this is when the CIA was like, fuck, we got to cut ties. So Orlando is...
There's a lot of that going around during that time.
Yeah, so Orlando's getting the little Nicky Hitler treatment. He's getting pineapples shoved up his ass in hell right now. But it was hilarious. It's like you train, you equip, you're like, all right, you're doing such a great job. And then, fuck. It's like when that staff duty gets the call in the barracks and he's like, what did you do now? And he's like, well, I started off at Toby's, and then I got this chick pregnant, and I bought a car at 27% interest rate, and then I did some cocaine, and then I wrecked the car into an orphanage, and it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Buried a body somewhere in Lejeune.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I was in a class with the JPD guys that were doing that. Good luck fucking trying to find anything resembling a case against those people. Those cops were fucking competent.
So we'll talk about we'll circle back Jinsaki on that one because I've got a little bit of, I'm not going to name names on that because I know the individuals that were like I personally know the individuals and served with them and like rode motorcycles with them and shit. So anyways,
the Dino was replaced by the CNI. The CNI basically, after the dictatorship fell, they just basically renamed the organization. That's what they'll do in a lot of these countries is the government will get overthrown and the intelligence apparatus will stay behind, and they'll just change the name and a couple key figures, and it just keeps doing what it was doing. Unless you're in the Iran. We can do an episode on Iran and just how absolutely violent and horrific their change of power was for their entire state apparatus. Like they lobotomized everything from people that run the sewage to the military, and it had catastrophic effects. So Brazil was under the military dictatorship. And again, Portuguese is a made-up language. Could you imagine getting tortured by a dude that speaks Portuguese?
No,
it just sounds like a duck on acid. That's all it sounds like. It's so fucking stupid. I can't believe it's a language. You're just getting tortured by a dude in short shorts, and he sounds like Super Mario.
I love that.
Brazil's dictatorship didn't really want to go the same route as everybody else. They would still, to a certain extent, support the other intelligence apparatuses in these countries, but they were of all the bad guys, they were probably, I would say, the least bad. Still fucking terrible people, still so psychopaths, but and they what brought to light that Brazil was involved in this is they had some crazy storms in the late 70s, and a bunch of bodies washed up, bodies of people that had been disappeared,
forced disappearances.
Yep. And most of the men they killed, most of the men they killed, and the women they put in prison, they would put women that were raped, and they would get pregnant, and they're like, all right, well, we'll lock them up. They would take the babies from these women and illegally adopt them. That's what we were talking about in the first episode too.
And
so
they went, the illegal adoption was, it went further than just the pregnant women too. Like they would say like a family was on their list, right?
Mm-hmm.
They would go in, murk the family, take those fucking, like take the newborn or whatever, and then
in some cases
rehome them with a cooperative family. And a lot of these people, they're like fucking in their 60s now and shit, 50s, 60s or whatever.
Around 50s, yeah.
And they still have no fucking idea that they were adopted.
Yeah.
Let alone forcibly, illegally adopted.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, to this day, thousands of people are affected. Brazil was, they were actually less cool with the other Condor nations working together in exchange for security intelligence personnel. But Brazil was like, we're down to smoke commies. We're just going to do it our way. Overall, when we look at everything that occurred for this episode, there was a lot of direct action. So the first episode, they kind of came together, and the actions from the first episode, they said, hey, this is how we're going to do stuff. This is how we're going to share information. This is how we're going to do rendition. This is how we are going to attack this problem. And this portion is how did we attack the problem? We basically infiltrated through covert and clandestine means and taking action and kidnapping, forced disappearances, rape, murder, all that stuff. That's very, very bad. And then the next episode, we'll talk about all the actions that occurred, the second and third order effects that to this day are still affecting these countries and how the U.S. is viewed, because a lot of Americans are let's be honest here, they're airheads. They're like, I don't understand why Venezuela doesn't like us. I don't understand why these people don't like us. And it's like, well, because you supported a brutal regime. Like you didn't, I didn't, our parents didn't, but our country that represents us did.
Exactly.
But if you, and there's a thing I like to post on Instagram, and it says basically suffering under a dictatorship is what we get for being lesser men than our ancestors. So if you had men that were strong, that were capable and could defend themselves and their territory, their property, their life, their liberty, their land, i.e. borders, then you wouldn't have people coming in and taking control of it. So are we to blame? Absolutely. Are they to blame? Yeah. Like 100%. So when we look here and we see we have a fentanyl crisis, somebody dies every 11 seconds. About every 4 days, 96 hours, a cop is murdered. Nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody gives a shit. Nobody gives a fuck about your shitty day. But we have to understand why you have certain things in our society that we have, which is the borders that we have are to maintain a sovereign state, because everything outside let's talk about it in a very simplistic way. This is our campfire. This is America. We're cavemen. Anything outside the fire, the people around it aren't friendly. We don't know who they are. They could be good, but overwhelmingly people are evil. Let's be honest here. Left to a nucleus of a family, you're going to take care of your own first. And when you have bands of military-aged males that band together and leave their area and they come to another area, they're not there to give you flowers. So when they come across these internationally recognized borders, they're a threat. But you have people here that are being influenced by these globalists. Like a lot of people use George Soros. George Soros is a fucking evil human being. He is a terrible human being, and he's been banned from most countries because he's a giant piece of shit. But he is influencing our district attorneys. He's influencing our education system, and a lot of people misrepresent and say, "Hey, this guy is the shadow behind everything." It's the best way to describe it is, you remember when everybody's like, "It's racist." Like, what? Math? Everything's racist. Okay, cool.
Aunt Jemima.
Everything's racist. And it doesn't make sense. It's paranoia. But there is a kernel of truth to that. If you can basically rot and decay our social fabric, our morality, and our very, thought process of relativity, which is a functioning government with borders and an economy, a military, and an education system. If you start to introduce that rot and decay, that fungus into the pumpkin seeds, it spreads if it's left unchecked. And what you have are emotional people that will say, well, I feel. Whenever I hear that, I'm just like,
I don't give a shit what you feel.
Anything coming out after your mouth after that statement is like, with all due respect. When somebody says, with all due respect, everything coming out after that,
it's just going to be fucking word
garbage.
vomit.
Just shut the fuck up. Like, the best thing to do is to exercise your right to not say a fucking word. So it sucks because Americans don't know shit about this. They don't know shit about, prior to us even becoming a country, they don't understand about what we did for Manifest Destiny. They don't understand about the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. They don't understand any of this stuff. What they see is Taylor Swift with that football player.
Yep.
Like, I can't
tell. What time does the Taylor Swift game start?
Every time I sit on the couch and
T-Swizzle, though, if you are watching this.
Oh, no. She is a giant piece of shit. She is a fucking vegetable. I have my friends that served in different special operations units were in her bodyguards. And her mom is a fucking whore, a psychopath and a whore who loves to fuck all the bodyguards. The dad's the only normal one there. And he does a hostage takeover kind of thing for different corporate, it's basically, he deals with mergers and acquisitions at the top tier level of corporations. He's cutthroat.
Yeah, like Fortune 500 companies.
Absolutely.
And shit like that. Yep.
And he's the only normal person of that family, if you consider that normal. The wife is literally fucking every dude that has a six-pack that did 20 years in SOCOM and is now a bodyguard for her. She is a fucking vegetable. All my buddies have said, Jesus Christ, I had more interesting conversations with people that didn't even fucking speak English. But what you have is you have a media that will propagate stupid shit like this. Right now, gas is expensive. We have Trank. There's literally, there's on our Instagram feed, there was somebody that was kneeled over. They were on fentanyl and Trank, and they became a zombie. That shit was in front of Whole Foods on Oleander. here in our city. But you give a fuck about some twat waffle who can sing into a microphone with auto-tune. Fuck right off, man.
Well, that, and I saw complete fucking schizocast a little bit on this last part.
Yeah.
I saw a fucking, it was a video of a goat screaming, and somebody auto-tuned it. I'm like, that sounds like almost every fucking person that's has a record label right now.
But the goal is to gain influence over a population so that you can make money, because that's what makes gears turn. There's a book called Atlas Shrugged, and the entire premise behind this book by Ayn Rand, she's a famous author. She actually created what's called, she didn't create it, but she brought it to light, called objectivism. And Ayn Rand is a personal hero of mine because she never kowtowed to the fucking alphabet mafia. She wrote around the same time that George Orwell did. She fled the Soviet Union. She fled the Bolsheviks. She came here to the United States and realized this system is amazing. Capitalism is amazing. It's where you get everything from space travel to medical to new thoughts and ideas. What is a real liberal? Somebody that is sitting there championing progression. Progression as a human to make the species better. And when we look at that, we can see that money, as it relates to work, this is the thing that I fucking hate about people, is they'll be like, oh, I make this amount of money. I don't care, because money's inflated now. What I care is, can you work? Do you work? Are you humble? Those things that made America great. It honestly did. You have these fucking fat people that will hide in their mom's basement, or these people that are like, I have fur babies and all this other stupid shit. Like, do you actually provide for society? Do you provide for your fellow man? And I also see that there's a lot of people that are influenced. They find your motivations, and they'll use these algorithms, and they'll use cameras to look and see if you're seeing advertisements. Everything from the acoustics of how you walk into Target, it's all engineered for you to spend money. Yeah. So there's a reason why you're seeing Taylor Swift all over the place. It's because we just sent fucking pallets of munitions to Israel. Then we have fucking advisors on the ground in Ukraine. It's to distract you. Like, you're getting ripped to the gills on
Look at this. Don't look at this.
Yes.
Movie. Don't look up.
Okay.
Great example of that.
You're ripped to the gills on wine in ancient Rome, and you're sitting in the Colosseum as a dude is about to get ripped to shreds by a lion. Do you give a fuck that there are barbarians at the gates? This is what we're looking at right now. We have an invasion of our country across our borders, our internationally recognized borders. The thing that is a reality to having a sovereign state. They don't want you to be looking at what the real problem is. They want you to be fighting each other. Left versus right, Democrat versus Republican.
White versus black.
Absolutely. Cops versus fucking Antifa. Well, that's actually pretty cool. Yeah, that's actually pretty cool. But at the end of the day, when we look at this, we see what we did in South America, and we realize it's a bad thing. What started off as us saving American lives from getting involved in another costly war actually wound up creating a whole host of misery and war crimes that were on a very large scale.
And pain that scarred history for us and all of South America and in Europe as well.
Yeah, well, Gladio is way more in depth and not nearly as draconian when it came to like murders, because there was we had the ocean separating us from the KGB and the Stasi and several other bad communist actors. But we look at this, and it's something that we can learn from. At the same time, we prevented another genocide in Central and South America that saved untold millions of lives. And if you add it up and you use compounding statistics on people that are going to be born in the future, you're saving billions. That's essentially what it boils down to. It's a really fucked up way of looking at it, and a lot of people aren't going to like that. But you slaughtered a couple thousand of these communists to save the overarching humanity. It's like if we could go to the beer hall putsch in Germany when the Nazis first tried their first coup, lined all of those motherfuckers up and shot all of them. You could save millions of Jews. You could save hundreds of millions of Russians and Europeans from dying needlessly. The Balfour Declaration. If we had killed those Nazis, we wouldn't have had to create the Middle East the way it was, with drawing lines in the sand. Now, imagine we rewrite history. We go back and we say we didn't implement Operation Condor. You would look and see that the borders of South America would be completely different. They would be divided. People would be killing each other left and right. There would be religious bigotry. We saved a lot of people by killing what were essentially communists, products of property of the state.
It is one life worth billions, basically.
Exactly.
And that's what when you look at the number of thousands versus the overarching population of any area. It's what it is. It's minuscule in comparison to what it could have been.
Now we look at that and we realize that nobody's really taking this seriously because it's more of a history niche kind of thing. Addressing this on the podcast is just something to sharpen your brain. Like, if all you know how to do is use your rifle, great. But if you know how to use your rifle, and you know how to use an anti-tank gun, and you know how to actually advise somebody on how to maneuver armor, you're expanding your brain housing group. So understanding how geopolitics works helps you spread your power and control through geopolitical means across the globe. It's how we prevent wars. Nobody wants to talk about that.
It's critical thinking.
Absolutely.
That's what it sharpens.
Yeah.
Like, what is it? Regurgitation. Like, I have a rifle. I go that way. I shoot. I did job. Like, no.
95% of your police agencies right now.
No, and military as well. I mean, that's okay. I say military. They're too busy making fucking TikToks on the range and shit.
Yeah. Have you seen? You see that Sable's down?
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh God, I was laughing so hard.
It didn't crash though.
It didn't crash, but
emergency landed. But I saw the video this morning where they were loading it up on a flatbed.
Yeah,
or on a low boy.
I was laughing my ass off. Like, people were like, "Oh, this is a great use of taxpayer dollars." You fucking smoking crack, dude. Reallocate that funding to hiring more detectives, to hiring more people on the beat. Maybe getting rid of some of the toxic leadership over there.
Well, that's never gonna happen.
Well, no.
Toxic leadership, as we've talked about before, will always be there.
It'll always be there.
All right, we're going to round this episode out, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you guys tuning in for Operation Condor Part 2. And happy birthday to all my degenerate fellow brothers and sisters out there. Hope you guys enjoy it. Don't get too fucked up. Don't be actually, you know what? Be a libo risk.
Yeah.
It beats sitting in the barracks playing video games. Go be a libo risk.
Wake up in the hospital with a good fucking story.
That's what it is. When you get out, that's what it is. You want to have stories to tell.
Absolutely.
Not, I sat in the barracks and played video games for 4 years.
Or you dress up in drag and take TikToks.
Play fucking D&D in the rec room.
Fuck.
Sorry, guys. I know a couple of them that did that. But rounding it out, we're going to do Operation Condor Part 3 next.
Everybody dies.
Everyone dies. No one left behind. We're going to have Mark Arrington come back on and do our Stoicism episode with him. I'm planning one that kind of coincides with this because it involves Kissinger, involving different CIA operations in Vietnam, the different call it black operations that we did from the 50s all the way up to the 80s, basically, during that time frame.
The reason we have oversight now.
Yeah, exactly. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if it's stupid and it works,
it's not stupid.
All right, and we'll see you guys on the next one.